York City is without a doubt one of the most famous cities in the whole world, and also one probably a lot of people have dreamt about living in at one point in their lives. So if you have decided that you are going to move to the city in 2021 and you are about to start searching for an apartment, then this video is for you. And if you're just daydreaming about moving to the Big Apple one day, then this video is also for you. So you can have an idea of what the process of searching for an apartment is like and everything you need to know before moving. With all that being said, let's get started with today's video. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Flor and I post new videos every single week, every Wednesday, talking about motivation, talking about working for yourself, talking about productivity, talking about books I like, and of course talking about New York City. If you're not subscribed to my channel already, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below and hit the notification bell to be notified of every time I upload a new video every single week. In today's video, and as the title suggests, and as I have mentioned in the intro, we are going to be talking about moving to New York City. All the things you need to know before moving and all the important information you need in order to look for an apartment. If you still haven't watched my video of our apartment tour in New York City, don't forget to go and watch that video as well. It will be linked up here and also down below in the description box. Now, about today's video, you have decided you are moving to the big city. Maybe you got a new job over there, or maybe you're moving because of college, or maybe you don't have a job, you're not going to university, but you want to live in New York at one point in your life, and you're going to figure it out once you're there, and that is also okay. Of course, the first thing you need when you get there is a place to live. So we are going to be talking about the whole process of looking for an apartment and finding the right one for you. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is how soon should you start looking for an apartment? Well, this answer depends on whether or not you've been to the city before, or you know the neighborhoods or the areas or what you're looking for, or if it's your first time going into New York and you have no idea about the subways or the streets or anything. So if you have no clue, no idea at all about the city, I suggest you start looking for an apartment around 3 to 4 months before the date you think you're going to start living in the city. And I say 3 to 4 months, not because you're going to find the apartment for you, but because this will allow you to get familiar with the different areas. For example, where your next job is going to be, or where universities, what subway stops you have near those places, what subway lines you should be looking into to find an apartment, to see what you can afford with the budget you have, or if you need to adjust that budget in order to get the type of apartment you want, or if you prefer a neighborhood that's more young driven with people going to university, or maybe if you have a baby and you prefer a neighborhood that's more family friendly. One way or the other, either you start looking 3 to 4 months before and you get used to the areas, or you already know New York City and you already know where you want to live, where you're gonna need to commute to. One way or the other, then I suggest that 1 month before your actual moving date, you start looking for apartments and for the apartment you're going to be living in. And you start touring those apartments or doing video calls to see the apartments. I'd say that because of how the New York market moves, starting 30 days in advance to your intended moving date, it's a safe and smart choice. Now, the second point I wanted to talk about is how do you actually search for an apartment? So for this, a tool I always recommend is called Street Easy. This is not a paid ad or anything like that. I would love to work with Street Easy, but it's not the case. This is honestly the tool I've been using for the past 5 years now for my apartment searches in New York City. So you go onto the site or you go onto the app, and what you are going to do is first select the area you want to move in. So you can choose the whole area of New York, and maybe you can add New Jersey as well, or you can choose neighborhoods or areas within those neighborhoods in the search. You can specify exactly what area you want to move into, and you can also draw a map. So for example, let's say you know where you're going to be working at and you want to live within 10 blocks of your new job. So you can draw in the map of the city the area where you want to search for apartments. And once you've done that, you can then select 2 other factors that are going to be very important when searching for an apartment that that are how much you want to pay for your apartment and the space you want, whether it's going to be a studio, a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, and then on. These are the 3 main things you need to define in order to actually find an apartment. The place you want to live in, what's your budget, and what's the amount of space, the type of apartment you are looking into. Once you have done that, there are other filters that you can also add on Street AC, like for example, does it have a dishwasher, or does it have a laundry in unit, a laundry in the building, does it have a gym in the building, does it have outdoor space in the apartment, in the building, does it have a doorman, is the building pet friendly. Anything you might need, anything you might think is important for your apartment search, you can put that in there and you can filter the results according to those conditions. I think in the end, it's a question of what are your non-negotiables? What are the things you really want in an apartment? Is it, for example, that it's a modern building with a doorman and an elevator? Or maybe do you prefer big windows or more space and maybe have a 2-bedroom where you can have an office, for example? Or you have a dog and it needs to be pet friendly. You are the one who decides what you want in your next apartment. I always say that no apartment is perfect, especially when you are, like all of us, within a budget. So you're probably going to keep something up in order to have something else that's more important to you. Now, moving on to point number 3 is what do you need for the apartment hunting process. Whether you're doing this by video call or in-person appointments, you need to have certain documents in hand because people are going to ask for them. These are usually 3 forms of ID, so passport, maybe driver's license, social security card. It is also advisable to have 2 recent bank statements, 2 recent pay stubs, a letter of employment, the first 2 pages of last year's tax return, guarantor's information in case that's applicable, a letter of your previous landlord if you can get that, and if you work for yourself, like in my case, it is recommended that you have a letter from your CPA with details of your annual earning. So once you have all these documents with you, make a few copies and you can now go into this in-person appointment, or you can do your video calls and maybe send them over through email. The market in New York City moves really fast, so it's recommended that you have everything in hand when you are interested in an apartment, because if you can give all this information, all these documents to the landlord or to the brokers and they can check everything, then you have more chances of getting this apartment before anyone else. Now, moving on to point number 4, and probably the most important one, is how much money do you actually need in order to rent an apartment? So once you have an idea of the area you like, the type of apartments you want, the apartments you want to actually go see, you might be wondering how much money you actually need in order to enter the apartment. So for this, and in New York City, it is usual that they ask for the rent for the first month, rent for the last month, a security deposit, which is usually 1 month rent. And then if you're working with a broker, they usually charge between 12 and 15% of the total annual rent, or at least 1 month rent. So if you're looking at an apartment that is, for example, $2,000, you might be looking at least $6,000 to enter the apartment because of the first month's rent, last month rent, and security deposit. And if you are working with a broker, at least $8,000. So I know this is a lot of money. New York City is an expensive city, but it's something you should consider. It's not only the monthly rent price, but everything that comes with that. And then you also have to consider the applications fee. By law in New York State, applications fee cannot be over $20. But the thing with application fees is that whether or not you actually get that apartment, you have to pay the fee, and it's 1 application fee per person that's going to live in the apartment. So if it's a couple, 2 applications fee, or 2 or 3 friends, same with that. I know this is a lot and I know it sounds crazy, but it's something that is very important to know well beforehand and not actually find out this information right before moving. And last but not least, I wanted to talk about how much money you actually need to earn in order to rent an apartment in New York City. So a thing you should know is that landlords usually ask that your gross annual income is of at least 40 times the monthly rent. So for example, if you want to rent a studio for $1,500 a month, you must prove that you make at least $60,000 a year. But of course, if you have found your dream apartment, but you cannot prove that you make 40 times the amount of the monthly rent, you have other options. One of them is to have a guarantor, as I mentioned before. A guarantor is a person or an institution that is going to be legally obliged to pay your rent if for any reason you cannot. Guarantors are expected to be earning at least 80 to 100 times the amount of the monthly rent. And another option, of course, is to find roommates. Roommates allow you to maybe get a bigger space for the same budget, or maybe find a neighborhood you like more. Well, if you got this far, I hope you're not scared about the prospect of renting an apartment in New York. I know it might sound scary and I know it's a lot, but the idea of this video is to give you a guide of what it's like to rent an apartment in the big city, how much money you need, what you need to be looking out for in case you're thinking about renting an apartment in New York City. New York is for sure one of the most expensive cities in the US and in the world, but it is also my favorite city in the whole world. So if you ever have the opportunity of moving there, I highly recommend it. And if you like this video, of course, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below and the notification bell. And don't forget to watch my previous video with my apartment tour of New York City that will be linked down in the description box, as I mentioned. And if you have any extra comments or questions or doubts about the process of apartment searching in New York City, do leave your questions down below in the comments, because I would love to do a follow-up video to this one where I answer all of your doubts, all of your questions. That is it for today's video. Hope you liked it, and as always, I will see you on the next one. Bye!